Open your Bibles, please, to Romans chapter 3. Romans chapter 3. And as you turn there, let me just quickly reset the stage for our study of Romans. The Apostle Paul has taken us really on the darkest of journeys. He has revealed the underbelly of our broken, messed up, distorted world. Just the ferocity and barbarity of human sin. God, he says, has therefore revealed his wrath against us. We all stand equally guilty before God. We're without excuse, Paul says, for our depraved behavior, all because we know that God exists, because he declares his existence every single day in the world that he made. We know that we owe him our worship, but instead of worshiping our Creator, we pervert worship and worship the creature instead. So, God handed us over in his righteous wrath to the most despicable practices. And Paul just narrowed it down between just perverted sexuality, perverted conduct. We abandoned God, and so he abandoned us. And does that not explain why our world is just so messed up and distorted and broken? And so as we come to verse 9 of chapter 3 today, we finally come to the end of this dark tunnel. It's just like Paul gathers up everything that he has said so far and just wraps it together into his conclusion. God's final verdict regarding us, all of humanity. Paul will declare, none is righteous. No, not one. No one understands. No one seeks God. That's the culmination of the bad news. But we aren't ready for the good news of the gospel until we first understand the indictment against us that comes down to us from God himself. And really the problem with all of this view of humanity, have you not noticed? It's on a collision course with everything that our culture tells us about our natural condition. People today profoundly disagree with just about everything that Paul has written. His assessment of our human condition, almost everybody disagrees with that, but let me tell you, if you are a Christian, neither you nor I can be influenced by what we as fallen people think of ourselves. Because what matters is our Creator's assessment of our condition. And so with that background, let's pick back up in verse 9. What then? Are we Jews any better off? Remember, he's been talking to his own fellow people, the Jews. Are we any better? No, not at all. For we have already charged that all, both Jews and Greeks, are under sin. As it is written, none is righteous. No, not one. No one understands. No one seeks for God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. No one does good, not even one. Their throat is an open grave. They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of asps is under their lips. Their mouth is full of curses and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. In their paths are ruin and misery. And the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Now we know that whatever the law says, it speaks to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be stopped and the whole world may be held accountable to God. For by works of the law, no human being will be justified in his sight, since through the law comes knowledge of sin. And so what we have here is the case against mankind. Actually, the closing argument of the case. Heather served on jury duty this past week. And the case that she was assigned to played out like the way all of them do. There's two sides. There's a judge, there's a jury, and both sides in that case, represented by the defense attorney, the prosecuting attorney, got a chance to argue their case. And then at the very end of the trial, both attorneys received one last chance to make their appeal to the jury. And really that's what Paul, the prosecuting attorney, is doing right here. He's making his closing argument. And this is his final charge. Every human being is under sin. He reminds the court of his earlier charge, for we have already charged that all, both Jews and Greeks, that's all of humanity, are under sin. And so really what we're going to have right here, the next several verses, is the most explicit description of just the total depravity of mankind that you find anywhere in the entire Bible. Now, that doesn't mean that every single person is as depraved as they possibly can be. And really, that's the bad news. That means there's always room for what I might call deprovement. You can get worse. We can get worse than we are. That's the total depravity. That's the power of sin that we are under. And I think one way to illustrate that would be to say, if sin could have a color, if the color of sin was blue, I guess it would be correct to say every aspect of you, every aspect of me would have some shade of blue to it. There's not a facet of who you are, psychologically, emotionally, physically, spiritually. All of us, the holistic being, is some shade of blue, and it can get darker and darker. We are all infected by this radical corruption that goes to the core of who we are as people. Jesus said in Matthew 7 that the fruit is corrupt. Why? Because the tree is radically corrupt. It's a famous Russian poet named Turgenev. I think he caught this perfectly. He said, I don't know what the heart of a bad man is like, but I do know what the heart of a good man is like, and it is terrible. Every human being is under sin. That's Paul's closing argument. That is his universal charge against all of us. And then like all attorneys, he substantiates his charge with evidence. He strings together a series of Old Testament quotes. It's something called a charaz. Charaz literally means stringing pearls. So we're going to go through this string of pearls. Paul's going to quote 6 Old Testament sources, 14 sweeping statements of devastating artistry. And his point is this: mankind's character and conduct, as well as the cause of all of that, are depraved. As for our character, he says in verse 10, none is righteous. No, not one. It's almost like if anybody is still thinking that, there might be an exception and I'm it, Paul just does away with that idea once and for all. No, not one. Whereas we speak of goodness in relative terms. It's like, he's a pretty good guy. You could bring up some, and I'm making an assessment of somebody. He's a pretty good guy. Oh, but the standard that's used right here in God's courtroom is the righteousness of God. None of us comes even close to that standard. It's only Jesus Christ who kept the great commandment to love God with all of his heart and all of his soul and all of his strength and all of his mind and to love his neighbor as himself. Only Jesus. Let me ask you, how many of us have kept that divine requirement perfectly just since we got up this morning? Just this one. Not one of us. Well, the next Old Testament pearl, which reveals our depraved character, is no one understands. No one seeks for God. Well, understands what? The depths of the things of God. Sin makes that impossible. I don't care what level of spiritual life, what level of understanding you think you have reached, you and I will always have a deficiency in our understanding. And let me give you another warning. The more you sin, the less and less capable you are of even ever understanding the things of God. No one seeks for God, he says. And that is, no one by nature, not one of us, wants to know God. And let me just say, that's a verse that many, many Christians simply do not believe. They don't believe it. Because often we will speak of somebody that we know as, they're really seeking after God. That's just not so. The word seek translates a word that means to seek out with a determined search. I watched a dog recently. There's a dog that is employed by the Department of Wildlife. Can dogs be employed? I don't know where their bank is when they get their paycheck. But this dog works for the Department of Wildlife, and he was out seeking a spent shell casing from a rifle. A hunter was suspected of illegally killing a deer. And in order to prove the case, the game wardens need to find that spent shell casing. You know by now, obviously, watching the news, every single shell casing from a gun. It's a long gun, a handgun. It can be traced back to that particular gun. And they've got the gun in their hands, and he's just saying, I didn't do it. But if they can find a shell casing, right there. And so they've got this dog, and his nose is to the ground. He will not give up. You ever seen a dog do that? They are beautiful to watch. Their nose is to the ground. And I tell you, he found that spent shell. Oh, and that man was proven to be guilty. Well, sadly, when it comes to us human beings, we don't search for God. We don't search for the truth with anything close to that single-minded tenacity. In fact, as Paul showed in chapter 1, we actually suppress it. It's like a giant spring, God's truth is, and we just try to lay on it. We try to push it down with everything that we are. Quit bringing it up. I don't want to think about it. We suppress it and we push it away. Oh, there's one exception when it comes to seeking for God. One exception. If the Holy Spirit is truly working in somebody's heart, you talk about some authentic seeking. I hold out Milo as exhibit A. Boy, when the Holy Spirit came upon her, she is seeking after God. The moment you become a Christian, that's the moment that your quest for God begins. But prior to our conversion, none of us, all of us were fugitives from God. We fled from Him instead of seeking Him. And I want you to think about that. In spite of that fact from the Bible, there are churches today right here in this city all across the land who are structuring their worship services for unbelievers who, according to them, are seeking after God. There are churches that are tailoring their preaching, just the style of preaching from the pulpit, their music, everything about church, everything about worship. They're doing it to appeal to the pagan, to help him or her find what they're desperately searching for and they just haven't found yet. How foolish to structure worship for unbelievers who are seeking after God, because the Bible tells us no unbelievers are seeking after God. Those churches are just literally manifesting their abject failure to understand the things of God. Because if they understood the things of God, they would know there is no such thing as an unconverted seeker. And somebody might hear me say that, and they might say, well, but Pastor, if that's true, if nobody really seeks after God, well, how do you explain all the people out there, all the non-Christian people who do seem to be searching for God in their life? I think that's very easy to explain. People all around us are feverishly seeking for purpose in their lives. We Americans in particular, we just want somebody to tell us that our life matters. We want our job to matter. We want our lives to matter. On our deathbed, we just want to know that we just see people seeking for purpose. We see people pursuing happiness. I'd rather be happy than sad, happy than depressed. We see people seeking for that happiness. We see people looking for just relief from guilt, just the pangs of their conscience, because we're sinners and we know we do things wrong. We hurt people we love, and we've got this guilt, and we're looking to get rid of it. And we see people doing all that, and so we Christian people see people searching for the things that we know that can only be found in Jesus Christ. And then here's what we do. We just make the gratuitous assumption, because they're seeking for the benefits of God, they must be seeking for God. That's the very dilemma of fallen creatures like us, apart from Christ. We want the things that only God can give us. We just don't want Him. It's like, give me God what I want. But I don't want you, right? It's true. We want peace. We just don't want the Prince of Peace. We want purpose. We just don't want the sovereign purposes given to us by our Maker. We want meaning, but we want that meaning to be found in ourselves and not in our Creator's rule over us. And so again, we in the church, I think we see desperate people and we assume they're seeking for God. They're not seeking for God. And I know that because God says so. No one seeks for God. Let me say to you, if you do seek God, that is the clearest indication you are already in the kingdom of God. You're His if you're seeking Him. Let me turn that around. If you do not seek God, just as the general rule of your life, He's not even in your thoughts. If you are not seeking Him, that is an incredibly scary indication that you are not in the kingdom of heaven. No one in their naturally lost condition seeks after God. Well, Paul's next Old Testament pearl, which reveals, again, our depraved character, verse 12, all have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. That's just the logical outcome of the verses right above it. Because no one has stayed on the path to God, well, they become worthless, useless. We cannot fill our purpose as God's creatures, made in the image of God. We can't do that naturally. We're kind of like fish that can't swim. We're kind of like birds that can't fly. We're useless. We're worthless. I was reading a commentary on Romans this past week. The author of that commentary, he mentioned that he was writing a book one time. It's about 100 pages into that book, and his computer crashed. And I don't know why, but he'd not backed his file up. 100 pages of thoughts. It's gone. I said, that's bad. But then this same author, he mentioned, he goes, you think that's bad? I got a friend, he was 5 years into completing his doctoral dissertation. I mean, it's just like a lot of school. It's like you go to college, get all that out of the way, go a little bit more to graduate school, get all that out of the way. And now, 5 years into trying to get a PhD, I mean, that's like almost there. The guy's nearly done, and his house catches on fire and burns it to the ground and burns the dissertation, computer, everything. Oh, the guy literally had to start from scratch. That's terrible, right? I don't think anything seems more tragic to us when we labor over something. I mean, labor as hard as we can, whether it's a doctoral dissertation or whatever it is, doesn't matter what it is. We labor, and then the fruits of our labor destroyed. God says, that very thing right there, that's the bottom line for you. If you are a living, breathing human being and you are not a saved follower of Jesus Christ, that's you. And including the richest, most successful person in the world, that's the bottom line. Worthless, useless, no profit. The whole world who does not know Christ and the gospel, they become worthless, unprofitable in everything they do. Paul continues, no one does good, not even one. Now we need to talk about that. Obviously, people all around the world do good things. None of us does it consistently, profoundly. Because according to the Bible, a good work to be good must not only conform to the commandments of God, you got to follow the commandment. It also has to come from a heart that is committed to honoring God. Nobody habitually does that. There are plenty of us that do what we should do. Why? We're fearful of the consequences. You know what I mean? It's like there are people at work who you're thinking, I'm going to be lazy. The boss is away. Then you're like, okay, but I might get caught. I don't want to get, and so you do the right thing. Great. The Bible says good, but your heart wasn't in it. And guess who knew that? God do it. None of us does this, this committed thing. I think of the rich young ruler. Remember that? He approached Jesus one day. He's so enthusiastic. And he interrupted Jesus and he said, good teacher, what good thing shall I do to have eternal life? And you know the answer. Jesus says, if you want to enter life, keep the commandments. And then Jesus listed out some of the 10 commandments. It's rich young ruler's like, I got it made. And he says, Jesus, all those things I have kept from my youth. And you notice Jesus didn't say, that is remarkable. You're the first person I have ever met who's done that, who's kept all these commandments from your youth. You don't even need me. No, Jesus didn't say that. He goes, if you want to be perfect, go sell everything you have and give it to the poor, and then you'll have treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me. You know the story. When that young man heard that saying, he went away sorrowful. Why? He had great possessions. And I think the saddest thing about that encounter is that Jesus literally met a man who thought he was good. Wow. Obviously, that rich young ruler had not been present the day Jesus preached what we call the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus explained the depth of the 10 Commandments. That young man had just a superficial understanding of goodness. That's what I'm trying to say. A superficial understanding. And so does everybody around us. Basically, America at large has a superficial understanding of God's goodness or of our goodness. No one does good. Not even one. So far, Paul's charis, that string of pearls, is very devastating to us. Our character in this sad string of pearls is just terrible. Well, next, Paul turns to mankind's depraved conduct. And his emphasis is first on human speech. And he just paints a very disgusting picture. It proceeds from the throat to the tongue to the lips to the mouth. Verse 13, their throat. Just speaking of all of us naturally, their throat is an open grave. They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of asps is under their lips. Their mouth is full of curses and bitterness. And really the universal dimension of sin is probably seen nowhere more evidently than in our speech. It's unbelievable, our speech. Our speech is like the odor of an open tomb. You imagine a funeral has happened, a dead body has been put in that tomb. How many days would need to go by before if you opened it and just the stench? You remember when Jesus said to the Pharisees, you are like whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but inside are full of dead men's bones and uncleanness. In other words, if you open your mouth, if I open your mouth and look down your throat, Jesus says, all I see is stench and corruption and death. Sometimes our speech is filthy. Sometimes our speech is deceiving. Sometimes it is as deadly as a cobra's bite. It's an asp. A cobra's bite isn't just fatal. You can ask Cleopatra. That's how she died. But it's exceedingly painful. The Bible describes our tongues as just like a sack of venom. We're like pit vipers. The words that we use can destroy, maim, and poison. I thought about this. I never heard my father curse. Or my mom. She's sitting right there. Either. I never heard my mother. Not even a slip. I thought about that. Like hit your thumb with a hammer or whatever. It's like, that's astounding. Never heard. So my entire childhood, I never heard that. And yet today, we live in a world where almost everybody around us can't even speak a sentence without vulgarity, blasphemy coming out of their mouth. You think about it on television, they give us symbols now to represent which rating a program has been assigned, right? Along with that rating, we find these letters. AC. What's AC? Adult content. They're expected. Oh, AL. Adult language. And if you see that symbol AL, you're getting ready to hear an earful. You're going to get it. It's going to be there, right? Foul language is so much a part of our society. I wonder how the people making movies back in the 1950s or before, how did they even communicate anything with that? All the profanity, that we have in our movies. We just take it for granted today that we are a people whose mouths are full of cursing and blasphemy and filthy talk. It's just who we are. The Bible tells us right here that is our nature. And it's not just that we let a bad word slip every now and then. Our mouths are filled with such talk in America. And you think about that, and it's not just America, but if you're wondering if we are on a slippery slope, I know all the preachers like me are warning of this, but I'm just take it from a man that's lived a few decades in the United States of America. It is just listen to us talk. We are becoming pagan. We are retreating. You might call us a Christian nation, whatever that might or might not have meant. Certainly we were founded on Christian principles. Definitely the Bible's morality used to penetrate and infiltrate culture a lot more than today. You talk about a complete turning upside down. Just listen to people talk. You know what I mean by the F word? Not only did I not hear my mom and dad cuss, I used to never even hear that. It's like unbelievable to hear that. Some of the roughest, crudest, most vulgar words, and you can't hardly watch or listen to anybody talk without that. People just like, oh, that's no big deal. What comes out of your mouth and mine reveals exactly who we are in our heart. We demonstrate sheer paganism by our mouths that are full of cursing and bitterness. Well, Paul's final touch when it comes to our depraved conduct, it really just sounds like the condensed history of the world. And as we read these next couple of verses, it's important to remember that when the Bible talks about our approach to life, it uses the metaphor of our feet, with our feet. Verse 17, their feet are swift to shed blood. In their paths are ruin and misery. And the way of peace they have not known. Murder and killing just reveal a world which is just turned toward barbarism. Our collective depravity is just seen in the rush to violence. And when Paul says their paths are ruin and misery, he's not referring to the subjective feelings that we feel inside, like, oh, I feel miserable and this. No, his point is that human beings inflict ruin and misery on other people. And in the same way, when he says the way of peace they've not known, he's not making a comment about, I've got so much anxiety and turbulence deep in my life. No, he's talking about the violent and savage behavior of human beings towards other human beings. And really, to read history is just to read the account of human beings acting in a warlike, violent fashion. Why? When people don't enjoy peace with God, when they don't know the God of peace, they will never be at peace with one another. That's the way it is. It's a wonderful book called Lessons from History. Will Durant wrote, in the last 3,421 years of recorded history, only 268 have seen no war. It's kind of amazing, isn't it? During World War II, it's estimated that it took $225,000 to kill one enemy soldier. Wow, think about that. I wonder how much is being spent today by our major nations like us. Mankind loves violence. I mentioned Heather's jury duty. So the man whose case she was assigned to, he didn't rob anybody. He wasn't caught in the middle of a drug deal, wasn't molesting anyone, kidnapping anyone. Just driving down the road here in Tulsa. His driving appeared a little bit erratic to two state troopers, and so they pulled him over. Well, the man refused to get out of the car for several minutes. Well, protocol calls for the officers to remove the person from the car when that happens. And so when they reached in to pull him out, well, that man punched one of those officers right in his left eye, put a chokehold on the other one. All three men are then just wrestling around on the ground, and the dash cam video, captures everything down. Almost 5 minutes goes by. These three men are fighting around on the ground on this interstate right here, I-44. The officers could not subdue the man because he kept fighting back. And so the jury that Heather served on, they convicted the man primarily because of his needless, violent behavior. It's like assault and battery against police officers and resisting arrest. That man is going to spend years in prison now for a moment of stupidity on an interstate right out there. So why would he do it? He wasn't drunk. He wasn't high. He wasn't hiding stolen possessions. He was just violent. Mankind does not know the God of peace, and so he's not at peace with others. Just at our core. And again, it's not everybody, but we could get there. We naturally are violent and cruel. So the theological root of sin, that's the conclusion to Paul's charaz here. It's sin's cause. First of all, we have looked at our depraved character. Secondly, at our depraved conduct. Well, now the cause. And Paul says in verse 18, there is no fear of God before their eyes. Paul just reaches into the wisdom literature of the Old Testament to remind us that the purpose of why did God create us? What's the whole purpose? Why are we here? We're all looking for purpose. Let me just get the whole purpose of life, the Bible tells us, is to fear and reverence God so that he would be esteemed as holy and majestic and mighty. And yet sin comes in, and at its heart, it wants to de-center God. It wants to de-God God. It rejects his right to rule over us. We're tempted to see, the brutality and the ferocity of sin as primarily sociological, just like us against us. Like, oh, she did that to him. We want to look at it like that. Look what you did to them. Oh, Paul reminds us, the root, the basis of all sin is the failure to fear and reverence God. I love the way Roman scholar Thomas Schreiner, he describes that relationship. He just says, I quote, sin is fundamentally theological in nature, but it has terrible social consequences. The barbarity of human beings to one another is ultimately explicable by a rejection of God and the failure to fear and honor him. Two of the earliest symbols that I can remember from my childhood are the peace sign. Should I put it on the peace sign? And then just two fingers up. I can remember those as a little boy. And as a little boy, these pleas for world peace, man, they just ran through culture, they ran through music, and right along with the demand that we cast down God, cast down authority, cast down all the social constructs by which rich oppressors use to keep everybody in, all that kind of stuff. The tragic thing, though, is that our culture leaders and our pop leaders lied to us with their sentimental calls for world peace. Because the only way that our world will ever know peace is to know the Prince of Peace, right? The only way that our sociological nightmares are going to end is when people begin to fear and honor God. But we can't create world peace because we're too busy de-centering God, de-godding God, rejecting His rule over our lives. And the incredible thing is that the very people who don't fear God, they think they're the smartest people in the world. I mean, non-believers, it's amazing how I think they're wise. Well, they don't have an ounce of wisdom in their head or in their heart. The Bible says in Psalm 14:1, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. The greatest fool. Paul's charge still stands true today. The entire human race, that's Jews and Gentiles, that's religious, that's irreligious, that's pious, that's pagans, utterly depraved. And then that brings us really to the overwhelming force of his conclusion. This is the case against mankind. And Paul has shown us first that every single human being is under sin. And then secondly, that our character and our conduct are depraved because we just don't fear God. We don't reverence Him. And the apostle concludes his case against humanity by showing third and finally that the law shuts every mouth. Now we know that whatever the law says, it speaks to those who are under the law so that every mouth may be stopped and the whole world may be held accountable to God. You know, every time that the New Testament describes the final judgment, where God's verdict comes down in His courtroom, the response every time of whoever is on trial is silence. Every time. Everyone keeps their mouth shut. It's interesting, as a Christian who's a neurologist, studies the functions of the brain, and he made an observation, just read that in the Bible, and then just made his professional observation. He said our brains are more incredible than the most vast computer system in the world. He said literally every experience that we ever have, every word that we ever speak is recorded in our brains. I know we wish we could remember some of it. Sometimes I'm glad we can't, but it's all there. And he said, therefore, regarding the final judgment, he goes, I think that on the last day, God's just going to take our brain out of our head and just put it right there on a table in the courtroom, plug in a recorder, and just hit rewind. Kind of old-fashioned, rewind, right? And he says, all of us, we're going to have to sit right there and listen to our brain replay everything that we have ever done and ever said and ever thought. And he concludes by saying, the prosecuting attorney won't even have to say a word. After such an event like that, it's like, what's there to say? What use is there arguing against God when God says, I already weighed you in the balance and I found you wanting? God will say, I can't find any true goodness in you. I searched your soul. I searched your heart. I do not see the perfect righteousness that I demand. I see only the poison of snakes in your mouth. I gave you my law, God will say, and you break it every single chance you get. So here's the conclusion of this part of Romans. The conclusion that really no sane person dare miss. Verse 20, for by works of the law no human being will be justified in his sight, since through the law comes knowledge of sin. Please hear this. The law, being as good as you cannot, will not ever justify you, make you right with your Maker. We will never be able to get into heaven on the basis of our works because the law actually reveals our filthiness. The law teaches us that by works of the law, no flesh, no human being will ever be justified in God's sight. And then I just wonder, why then? Why in the world do people all around us, maybe you, why do we continue to hope that our good deeds are going to be good enough to satisfy the demands of God? Let me just say to you, don't believe that. Do not rest on your good works as the grounds of your justification before God. And so as we close, verse 21. Wow, we've been waiting on it. This verse signals that we're finally coming out of this dark tunnel. 3 chapters. Verse 21 begins with my favorite word in the New Testament, but. That word makes all the difference in the world. Those 3 little letters, B-U-T. That's the difference between heaven and hell. Finally, after this relentless indictment that we have endured, we are coming to where Paul finally says, but now the righteousness of God, apart from the law, is revealed. It's time for the gospel. That's what. It's time for the gospel. We have listened to the bad news so that we might hear the goodness of the good news, which we will begin examining next Sunday. But as you stand right along me in our natural condition, condemned, do you even know that you'll wake up tomorrow? Are you ready for Judgment Day? Are you ready? Do you know on the day you die where you're going? And if you don't, if you have been laid totally open, completely bare before your Maker through His words this morning, why don't you come down and shake my hand as fast as you can? I want to just welcome you into the kingdom. You got a new sister sitting right here, Well, come forward. Would you please stand to your feet?